champion in UFC history!
He was born to fight, blessed with elite athleticism, natural talent, and a hunger that seemed insatiable. Jon Jones had everything it took to become the greatest fighter in the world. And he did. But even as he was climbing the mountaintop, even as he was conquering his opponents in the Octagon, he was losing a far more important battle, the one inside his own mind. This is the story of a champion who could defeat anyone in the world except himself. This is Jon Jones, the fighter who kept fighting himself. Jon Jones wasn't supposed to just be good, he was supposed to be legendary. From his early days in MMA, it was clear that he possessed something rare, a physical toolkit that was almost unfair: reach, athleticism, coordination. A fight IQ that was years ahead of his peers, a hunger to prove himself that bordered on obsessive. By his early 20s, Jon was already competing at the highest level of mixed martial arts in the UFC. He was beating experienced fighters. He was learning at an accelerated pace, and when he won the light heavyweight championship, it felt inevitable. This was a man destined for greatness. Jon Jones became a multiple-time champion. He defended his belt more times than almost anyone in history. He conquered elite opponents. He earned accolades and records. But somewhere along the way, as Jon was reaching the top, something else was happening beneath the surface. Something darker, something that would prove far more damaging than any opponent he'd face in the cage. The first signs came outside the Octagon. A hit-and-run incident, cocaine use allegations, failed drug tests, violations of anti-doping policies. None of these were rumors, they were documented. They were real, and they raised a question nobody could answer. Why would a man with everything, success, money, fame, legacy, throw it all away? The answer is complicated. Having external success doesn't cure internal demons. Being a champion in the cage doesn't mean you've conquered the battles in your mind. Talent and achievement don't protect you from addiction, poor judgment, or self-destructive behavior. Jon's issues weren't just about bad decisions. They were symptoms of something deeper. A man struggling with his identity, his demons, and his inability to make the right choices, even when the stakes were highest. Every time he messed up, he promised change. Every time he failed, he committed to being better. But the pattern kept repeating again and again. Violation after violation. Promise after broken promise. What makes Jon Jones's story particularly compelling is that his biggest opponent was never in the Octagon. It was himself. He had the skills to beat anyone. He had the intelligence to overcome any strategy. He had the physical tools to dominate any fighter. But he couldn't overcome his own choices. He couldn't fight the urge to use substances. He couldn't resist poor decision-making. This is the tragedy of Jon Jones. He had the potential to be the greatest fighter of all time. There's an argument that purely in terms of fighting ability, he already is. But his legacy will always be tainted by the decisions he made outside the cage. The championship belts are real, the victories are undeniable, but so are the suspensions, the failed tests, and the wasted opportunities. What's particularly painful is that Jon seemed aware of his struggles. He spoke about it, he acknowledged his issues, he sought help at times, but awareness without sustained action is just performance. Jon kept slipping back into old patterns, over and over again. The cycle of redemption and relapse became his identity as much as his fighting ability. If Jon Jones had simply been a dominant fighter with a clean record, he might be remembered as one of the greatest of all time without question. Instead, his legacy is one of what if? What if he'd made better choices? What if he'd truly addressed his demons? What if he'd valued his reputation as much as his wins? The opportunities he lost are incalculable. Sponsorships, respect from the fan base, the chance to be unquestionably recognized as the GOAT, the respect of his peers, all of it compromised by his inability to get out of his own way. Self-destruction doesn't just hurt you, it hurts everyone around you. It disappoints your family, your team, your fans. It robs the world of what could have been. Every violation was a robbery from the sport of the chance to see a truly transcendent champion competing with complete integrity. What makes Jon's story so compelling and tragic is the repeating cycle. Mistake, apology, promise of change, period of good behavior, and then, inevitably, another incident. Another failure, another step backward. This pattern reveals something crucial. Change isn't a moment, it's a practice. And Jon never quite managed to make it a daily practice. There were times when Jon seemed genuinely committed to turning it around. Times when he appeared focused. Times when it seemed he'd finally broken through. But then something would pull him back. The urge would return. The old habits would resurface. And the cycle would begin again. This teaches us something about real change. Knowing you need to change isn't enough. Being talented enough to succeed despite your flaws isn't enough. Having resources and support isn't even enough. Real sustained change requires something Jon struggled with. The daily commitment to do the hard work, every single day, without exception. What Jon Jones's story reveals is that the greatest battles aren't fought in the octagon. They're fought in your mind. They're fought every single day when nobody's watching. They're fought when you have to choose between what feels good and what's right. They're fought when you have to be disciplined even when discipline is hard. Jon is an elite fighter. Nobody questions his abilities in the cage. But his real test, the test that matters most for his legacy, is the fight against himself. And unfortunately, he's not winning that one. Not consistently, not fully. The difference between being remembered as a legend and being remembered as a cautionary tale isn't raw ability, it's character, it's discipline, it's the daily decision to do the right thing, even when nobody's watching, even when it's hard, even when you want to do something else. So, what can we learn from Jon Jones? It's simple but profound. The battles that define you aren't the external ones. They're the internal ones. They're the choices you make when nobody's looking. They're the discipline you maintain when it would be easier to quit. They're the integrity you preserve when you could compromise it. Jon is a champion, but he could have been a legend. And the difference between a champion and a legend isn't wins, it's character. It's not how many times you succeed in the octagon, it's how many times you succeed against yourself. Your talent means nothing if you can't control yourself. Your potential is worthless if you're not disciplined. Your ability to do great things is irrelevant if you can't make good choices when it matters. This is the story of Jon Jones, a fighter who had everything the world could offer except the one thing that truly mattered: control over himself. He could beat any opponent, overcome any strategy, and achieve any physical goal. But the one fight he couldn't consistently win was the fight against his own choices. That's not a failure unique to Jon, it's a human struggle. But his prominence makes it a lesson for all of us. The greatest victories aren't won in front of millions. They're won in private moments when you choose to do the right thing. That's where legacy is actually built.